So the balancing update that we've all been waiting for finally came this past Wednesday and brought with it a couple of awesome buffs for two-handed Frost DK and an awesome buff for dual wield. So what's the current state of Frost Death Knight right now on the Shadowlands pre-patch? Well, so far it's left us in a pretty great place, and two-hand Frost DK feels good, and it's even competitive with dual wield Frost DK, even winning out in certain scenarios. The difference between the two is pretty much the exact same as it was pre-Legion, with dual wield excelling at its fast-paced, resource-saturated combat style, and is better equipped to run Breathless Dragosa, which is still our highest performing burst talent for Mythic Plus or any AoE situation. All of this together makes dual wield a Mythic Plus no-brainer. Two-hand Frost is excelling with its devastating single target damage and its well-rounded AoE. On top of this, due to the runic attenuation buff that we got this past Wednesday, two-hand Frost and dual wield have absolutely no problems with having dead zones in their rotation or running out of resources. What I've found is that just like in Warlords of Draenor, a two-hand Frost DK can absolutely keep their Breathless Dragosa going for almost as long as a dual wield DK can, as long as you have Empower Rune Weapon and you know how to manage your resources properly. All of this makes two-hand Frost DK an absolute PvP no-brainer, and a very competitive option in both raids and Mythic Plus, especially when there's not too many large trash packs that are in your way. Looking at our talents, we have a couple of different builds for both two-handed Frost DK and dual-wield Frost DK. Inexorable Assault is still the best DPS increase regardless of what weapon type you choose to play with. Even if you combine all of the auto attack proc talents and all the passive talents with Icy Talons, you still come up with about a 33% DPS loss. Runic Attenuation is still the best choice overall for both weapon types, especially since it got its buff this past Wednesday. Even when running Obliteration as either weapon type, Murderous Efficiency just doesn't keep up with the never-ending fountain of runic power that Runic Attenuation offers you now. Choosing Murderous Efficiency seems to come with about a 15% DPS loss outside of the burst window, and inside the burst window it is a little bit better, but it's hardly noticeable, and in my opinion definitely not worth it in comparison to Runic Attenuation. Gathering Storm is still the go-to talent for maximum DPS with either dual wield or two-hand Frost DK. Hypothermic Presence is a cool and new talent on paper, but in practice it just isn't effective enough. It doesn't last long enough for me to really feel much of a difference. I find that I never run even the slightest risk of running out of runic power in the first 8 to even 20 seconds of my Breathless Dragosa as either two-hand or Frost DK. Because of this, its addition to the burst window goes largely unnoticed. As for using it when you feel like you're losing momentum near the end of your Breathless Dragosa, its 35% effect over 8 seconds just doesn't make a big enough impact even near the end of your Breathless Dragosa to really feel like it's making a difference. Overall, I don't feel like you get any added bonus to Hypothermic Presence DPS wise in comparison to the massive DPS bonus that you get from Gathering Storm. Where Hypothermic Presence really shines is using it as a utility ability in order to minimize dead zones in your rotation or to increase those windows of opportunity for healing yourself with Lichborn and Death Coil or Death Strike. For the final row, as I said before, Breathless Dragosa is applicable to both specs, dual wield and two-hand Frost DK, and it is super useful for heavy AoE dungeons. But for single target, Breathless Dragosa just does not stand up to the power of Ice Cap or Obliteration. But for single target or light AoE situations, Obliteration is pairing really nicely with two-hand Frost DK, and Ice Cap is pairing really nicely with dual wield. The reason Obliteration works so well with two-hand Frost DK is because it way increases the damage on your Obliterate, which of course is going to scale wonderfully with the spec. It also gives us a chance to regain a rune on consuming the Killing Machine proc, which plays really nicely into the strengths and the weaknesses of two-hand Frost DK. Ice Cap is shaping up really nicely for dual wield DK because it really pairs nicely, bringing the consistent high burst DPS that dual wield is kind of known for lacking. It really brings that into the spec and really plays into its weaknesses and strengthens them tremendously. And since the buff to Ice Cap, you can now pretty much use Pillar of Frost around every 35 seconds. which is awesome. However, Ice Cap is getting a little nerfed in Shadowlands because the moment you hit level 51, all of your Azurite traits are going to be deactivated. That means you're going to be losing both your Frostwelt's Indignation and your Icy Citadel Azurite traits, which together are pretty much what makes Pillar of Frost the massive powerhouse that it is. So we're going to have to see how that plays out to see if maybe Obliteration becomes the go-to for dual wield as well. As far as our self-healing goes, due to the abilities that were added back in the Unpruning, we have much more defensive utility in the form of Lichborn / Death Coil and AMZ. We also can't forget about Sacrificial Pact, which is basically the good version of Death Pact that we will be getting at level 54. Currently, Death Coil heals my Death Knight for about 1900 health, which is roughly 11% of my total health pool. Considering you can only get 2 to 4 Lichborn Death Coils in on yourself during the Lichborn window, since they do cost 40 runic power, this means that at best you can expect to get around a 45% health return. Now on paper this sounds really good, and to you it might sound like a really good size heal, and it kinda is. However, in PvP right now it feels like nothing. It's just gone. Almost as fast as you are healing yourself with those Death Coils, you are losing the same amount of health, if not more. I'm looking forward to the removal of essences and further class tuning going on between now and the actual release date for the pre-patch to see if that kind of helps Lichborn come into its own and kind of find where it fits. As for essences, I've been running Reaping Flames Major, Memory of Lucid Dreams Minor, Conflict and Strife Minor, and Crucible of Flame Minor. For AoE / dungeons, I actually pretty much run the same thing, except I exchange Blood of the Enemy for my Reaping Flames. Essences won't become inactive until we hit level 51 in Shadowlands, so up until that point, we are stuck with essences. As for stats, I haven't had too much of a chance to play with stat priority because thanks to BFA's horrible gearing systems, but I've been running Mastery over Verse over Haste, and that seems to be working really well for me, and chances are this is probably going to be what I'm going to end up running since Obliterate's going to be scaling with Mastery in Shadowlands. Our damage is a tad lower in comparison to some other classes I fought against and fought alongside in the Shadowlands pre-patch BTR, but tuning down the road could drastically change that, and that's tuning for us or tuning for those other classes, especially Locke and Ret Paladin right now seem to be doing a tremendous amount of damage, S-Priest too. Our class plays well, our 2 different play styles seem to be really well balanced with each other so far. We do good damage, we have team utility, we have good options to heal ourselves and defend ourselves, and our mobility still sucks. But most importantly, we have 2-hand Frost DK back. So overall, I would say that this has been a good week for Frost DK. Hit that like button, it helps tremendously with the algorithm. Also remember to subscribe and ring that bell notification. Without any further ado, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed, and have a great day.